So thank you. So my name's Kit Colbert. I'm the CTO for our cloud platform business at VMware. A couple of things. So first of all, I just got back from Beijing, so I'm extremely jet lagged, and I caught some sort of thing on the plane, so keep your distance from me.
Yeah, stay down. I'm glad I'm
And I apologize about the coughing if that happens. Secondly, I've loved the conversation so far, and I kind of realized that some of my slides probably aren't quite the best ones for this one, so I'll ad-lib a bunch. Thirdly, we made a audible, and we're going to do a live demo in just a minute as well. So fun. This is kind of how this team rolls, right? Very agile, making decisions on the fly. Okay, so we talked about a lot of these foundational technologies, VxRail, VMware Cloud Foundation. We're actually taking both of those and combining them along with a bunch of other goodness for what we call VMware Cloud on Dell EMC. Now, if you're not familiar, we actually announced this as a project back at VMworld 2018 called Project Dimension. And so this is the first instantiation of Project Dimension as an actual product. Now, some of these slides, I don't think we'll need to get into that much detail. Like, for instance, this first one here talks a lot about, why on-prem. I think that's kind of been an assumption from the beginning for this crowd. People get why we need on-prem infrastructure. But you have to understand that where we're coming from a VMware Cloud on Dell EMC perspective, it's very much a cloud perspective. There's kind of this notion of cloud as a place versus cloud as a model. Right? When people talk about public cloud, or talk about cloud in general, they tend to mean like public cloud as a place, but sometimes they're actually talking about it as a model, i.e. delivery as a service, pay-as-you-go, subscription models, these sorts of things, right?
Okay, thanks.
So this is absolutely where we are focused when we talk about VMC on Dell EMC. And so because of that, when you start getting into these cloud discussions, people are often like, well, why? If I'm doing cloud, do I need things on-prem, right? So again, I won't spend too much time on this slide, but we believe that there's a tremendous opportunity on-prem that not only are workloads moving to the public cloud, but workloads are moving back on-prem. There's a lot of things happening at the edge, those sorts of environments, a lot of activity there. So when we look at those two types of models, right, on-prem versus public cloud, and again, separating out cloud as a place from cloud as a model, these are some of the key differences here. And as VMware started getting into VMware Cloud on AWS, this notion of delivering our SCDC, VMware Cloud Foundation, as a service running on top of AWS bare metal, we saw there's a bunch of value that our customers were getting from that. This notion of as a service sort of across the board. This notion that our customers didn't need to deal with the nitty-gritty of our infrastructure. All these challenges that we're fixing with both VxRail and VCF kind of go completely away in a cloud model, because the customers aren't actually deploying any of our software. They're not figuring out which versions work together. They're not doing any of that compatibility testing. They're not fixing any of the problems that might crop up or occur from a day two perspective. And there's a lot of value there. And so the thought was, can we take all this cool stuff that we're doing over here in the public cloud realm and apply that on-prem to actually deliver a cloud model on premises. And so from the design, from the beginning with Dimension, the focus was always, how do we deliver that cloud experience on-prem? How does it work with VMC and AWS, or how does it work in native Azure? What are the typical sorts of experiences customers have, and trying to replicate that on-premises, basically making it just like a cloud experience. It just so happens that SCDC runs on-prem, right? And the hardware is on-prem. So again, I won't spend too much time on why on-prem, because I think folks here get that. But broadly speaking, we are seeing a tremendous interest here, and a lot of interest from customers in really simplifying their on-prem experience. So let me get to what we're actually talking about here. So VMware Cloud on Dell EMC. So again, this is cloud. This is a cloud model. It just happens to be delivered on-prem. And so what that means is that, and by the way, one thing I want to distinguish between, people use the term managed service a lot. This is not a managed service. This is a cloud service. And so what's the difference between a cloud service and a managed service? Well, in my mind, very oversimplifying, because that's what I do. I'm a CTO, so I keep things very simple, too confusing for me otherwise. A managed service is really about a human interface. When you want something, you give someone a call, you send them an email, you file a ticket. traditional sort of IT process for a managed service. A cloud service is API based, right? And that's the same thing here. When you, as you'll see, when you want a new host or a new rack or whatever, you go to vmc.vmware.com. You're not calling someone, you're not sending an email, you're not filing a ticket. You're using a web UI or calling an API. Again, we manage this behind the scenes. We're monitoring it. We work with Dell on grabbing telemetry from those systems, predictive sort of failure analysis type things. And so we integrate with their service technicians and support. And we don't want customers touching these machines. In fact, you're not supposed to as a customer. In fact, in the contract, don't touch the machine. Yes, the box is sitting in your environment, but it's a cloud service. And just like with AWS and EC2, you can't touch those. I mean, you can't get access in that data center. You're not allowed, right? Your workloads are there, but they operate those machines for you. So again, it's a very similar sort of thing. Now, from an architecture point of view, as you can see here, it is VMware Cloud Foundation under the covers. So it's our core compute storage network offerings, fully automated, right? A lot of the same automation capabilities there. All the great value props that we've just talked about in the past, hour and a half, whatever it is, built on top of VxRail from a hardware form factor perspective. But again, a lot of differences between what we're doing here in traditional partnerships with our hardware partners. Traditionally, we have an HCL that we validate against, right? Kind of basic level support validation. And here we're doing a much deeper level of integration. In order to deliver an actual cloud service, we've had to really work closely with Dell EMC to drive deep integration into the, I mentioned a lot of them, right? Into the manufacturing process, right? So they're calling up to get the latest cloud bits from us to flash onto those servers, generating a unique certificate for those servers. So when the box powers on, it can automatically connect up to the cloud. We can identify who it is, what customer it actually belongs to, start customizing it, and customers off and running. Integrating with their telemetry systems, as I mentioned. Again, we've got to manage both the hardware and the software. We need to understand when something fails, is it a software problem that we can fix remotely or a hardware problem? And how do we actually think through that? Service and support. So again, if there is a need to dispatch a physical person to that location, we can do that. And one of the great things about Dell is that they have these people everywhere, all around the world. In many places, they can actually get that turnaround within 4 hours, right? To be there with the right parts to fix whatever the issue is. And also from a financial perspective and financial systems. So working closely with Dell Financial Services to take title to that hardware so we can sell it to the customer on an as-a-service basis, right? So a whole bunch of things we had to do there behind the scenes. So this is not a normal level of partnership, right? As you can tell both from Cloud Foundation, from VxRail, we're getting kind of deeper and deeper into this and driving more and more streamlining so that the customer experience is that much simpler. The other thing I'll mention really quickly, we talk about this hybrid cloud control plane. And the notion here is that we want to, again, give you that cloud experience. So when you're going to manage this stuff, you always start from the cloud interface. And that's where you start. It's kind of like what Mark was talking about from a VCF standpoint. There's kind of this manager or control plane that lives above the SDDC, and that you can have many SDDCs that this thing's managing. And to the conversations that were happening earlier, directionally, yeah, this is where we want to go. Just giving you kind of the VMware view for a second here. We perceive there to be, over time, more and more SDDCs within a given customer environment. Especially with things like this and all the technologies we talked about today, we're making it easier and easier to provision more and more SDDCs. Each workload domain is kind of its own little micro SDDC. With VMC and AWS, you can have these really tiny SDDCs, and you can make them and create them as quickly as you want. And so where we see this going is that actually customers will have hundreds, at least dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of SDDCs over time spread across the world, right? And so how do you possibly manage all of those SDDCs? You need some way to manage those things at scale. You can't, if you've got 1,000 vCenter instances, what does that even, how do you log into 1,000 vCenter instances to go fix things? You can't. So you got to manage at a higher level of scale. So yeah, so to some of those questions, look, we can't boil the ocean. We got to start very pragmatically, but over time we want to drive more and more functionality to these higher levels of our control planes. And again, so go through the demo, we can call some of this stuff out.
I love the proposition, but one of the things that is driving my customers to the cloud is from the from the developer perspective, we've got serverless. We've got some of the higher level offerings that you can leverage, like Lambda and whatever like that. You guys have dispatch, or you I don't know where it's at right now, but you had dispatch. Is that something that is a thought process? So the consumption model is different. So going back to here, I want to still give them the same offerings that they can get there, because if I say I can't give you serverless unless I leverage dispatch or unless I layer this in there. But then I'm going down the path of making more process.
Yes. Yeah, so this is a great question. It's partly why at the beginning I was like, oh boy, I realized I need to bring in some of the broader VMware vision into this to kind of, because I knew some of these questions were going to come, right, based on your earlier questions. So thank you for that. So let's take a step back a little bit and talk about the overall VMware perspective here, right? So when I think, so again, my focus, VPBU, we're the vSphere organization, VMware Cloud and AWS, VMware Cloud and Dell EMC. That's kind of what we do, right? We do core infrastructure. And as part of the vSphere focus, we're really looking at two primary things. Number one, how to continue to evolve vSphere, to give it all these great capabilities, to solve sort of problems that you're talking about, Chris, as well as to proliferate it, to get it to as many places as possible. And in that proliferation one, the other aspect of that is actually the consumption model. How do we offer more and more consumption choices for customers? So there's three broad consumption choices that we have. We have what you might call customer managed, and that's where VxRail, VCF would fall. And by customer managed, what I'm saying is that although we do a lot of automation for you, in the end, the customer is the one that takes the page, that has the SLA, right? There's partner managed. So partner managed, we've got 4,300 service provider partners. We have a ton of folks who do managed services, based on my definition earlier, right? A lot of ways for these partners to take the brunt of those operational requirements away from the customer. So in that case, partner takes the page, partner owns the SLA. The third option is VMware managed, where VMware owns the SLA and takes the page. And so these are three different options, and within each, there's a variety of choices there for our customers. And I think the notion is that there's no one size fits all. That different people will want different things, and even in a single customer may want different scenarios or different use cases based on their scenario, right? So so this is one way of delivering delivering vSphere in this kind of cloud manner on-prem. Now, but your point is really about what are we delivering, and how can I get some of those high-level services that are part of a cloud experience? And so, for that one, it's like, how are we actually evolving vSphere itself? So, and that's kind of that first prong that I mentioned. So there's a lot of work happening there. So you have seen at VMworld things like Project Pacific, this notion of us building Kubernetes into vSphere and actually enabling vSphere to have Kubernetes as an infrastructure interface. The real power of this is that it enables us to plug into all the innovation that's happening in that Kubernetes ecosystem. And so there's a ton of different, let's say, serverless type functions of service implementations that work on top of Kubernetes. There's a ton of different cloud native technologies, modern databases, MongoDB, Redis, who have built Kubernetes operators and these other sorts of things. And so all this ecosystem will now work on top of vSphere because of the fact vSphere has Kubernetes built into it. And so that's not the topic for today. But the point is that there's a tremendous amount of effort going in there, right? And think of things like Anthos. So Anthos from Google only runs on top of vSphere today on-prem. But Anthos brings along a bunch of Google Cloud services along with it, right? So that there's some additional services that if you have vSphere, you can take advantage of. And so the idea is that we really want to build a community, marketplace, if you will, of all these different vendor higher level services, right? So rather than VMware going out and building them all ourselves, our strategy is to partner. There's a tremendous amount of innovation that's happening out there, both in the open source space and just in regular proprietary implementations. And we want to be able to take that on top of vSphere and be able to deliver that to all the different places that vSphere runs.
Right.
So that's kind of how we address that question.
I'm curious about some of the, and I think this is sort of what Chris was alluding to, the platform as a service layer of cloud.
Yep.
And we talked about Kubernetes a little bit, and that is one platform as a service you could offer, but there's a lot of other services in the public clouds. The object-based storage, offering some sort of website as a service, whether that's app service or Elastic Beanstalk. There is serverless functions. Data warehousing, like there's a whole bunch of things that you could offer as an additional layer. So where is VMware going to try to build that itself, and where is it going to rely on
so
to build that platform?
That's a great question. So you can certainly imagine some areas we may try to build ourselves or do really close partnerships, like really basic storage primitives like an S3 object store type model, right? But by and large, we will partner. We want to partner. And so if you look at what we've done with Bitnami, the acquisition of Bitnami, big partnership there with all the different open source projects. And what we've done is we're basically parlaying Bitnami into something we're calling VMware Cloud Marketplace that we also launched at VMworld. And so the idea of this marketplace is, again, this set of high-level capabilities that you can deliver not just to vSphere, but to any sort of location. Cloud Marketplace works very broadly. But particularly within the vSphere context, we can deliver those things to wherever vSphere runs. So that is going to be the primary mode of operation for us. Although, things like Kubernetes was so core, we want to do that one ourselves, right? And so, we still haven't made decisions on all these yet. We're kind of looking at it and trying to decide. But by and large, we believe the better strategy is to partner. And so if you look at VMware, right, like our partners and our partner ecosystem is what has helped make us as successful as we've been today. And thus far, most of those partners kind of been under us, so to speak, the hardware partners, cloud partners, et cetera, where we run. Where we're going to be investing a lot in is the partners above us, right, above the IaaS and Kubernetes layers. And so that's something that, again, we started to make moves toward. But we're still in the infancy there. I guess the other point I'll bring in really quickly is that if you look at the announcement around the Pivotal acquisition, there's another set of some of those higher level capabilities, some of the app services and so forth that we'll be getting into. So so I think there will be a few of them that we do, but most of them like we're not going to do a database, right? Those are things we partner on.
You don't want to write your own database?
I was going to say, but not today. You're not going to.
It only take 10 years.
You haven't truly lived.
So I have a comment. Almost 7 years ago, I began speaking at events, and my title at that point was The Journey to the Private Cloud. 7 years later,
we're just now.
We pretty much have failed at the journey because the journey is ongoing and most companies haven't gotten there. So what I see is this is kind of providing that solution because it's been too difficult for that digital transformation to take place within organizations because they need the automation, the orchestration, and then we've got Kubernetes and we've got so much new stuff happening. So they want the easy button. They want what's in the public cloud, but they want it and need it on-prem, and they need a cloud strategy, including public and private. So you're giving them that easy button and using a lot of open source and partnership in order to get that. So is that correct?
I said it better myself.
Okay.
But I haven't heard OpenStack.
But there's a part of that,
Where's
right? So that journey has. So that journey has moved, right? It's shifted a bit. That easy button, though, to the point everyone else here has been making, it's not a. Infrastructure by itself is not the thing that I want. I want to deploy a website.
You're absolutely right.
A database. And so your competitors do allow someone to roll a rack in, plug it up, and start deploying databases and websites and other things.
So Nate, I challenge that. I don't want a web server. I don't want a database. I want a business outcome. So
we're starting the conversation from I want a business outcome. How does VMware infrastructure get me to that business outcome? So where we get held up a lot is because we think in these terms of containers, VMs, etc. The business doesn't care about any of that. Doesn't even care about the database. Just care about the data and the business outcome.
What value am I getting?
I want to go on to that business outcome part is because a lot of the focus in the prior three presentations are very focused on day -1, day 0, day 1, day 2. And we're solid in. I understand the vision, the story around how to get to day 2. I'm worried about day 300. What is the VMware story around deprecation of things within the partner chain? Because that's a challenge we face inside of each of these things. Is we build our business, and this is how we do it. And they're like, hey, that thing you run your business on, yeah, we're deprecating that tomorrow.
Yeah.
So go change your business. Like, well, we can't. Like, and that's why a lot of people still stay on premises, because they can control the code change and the code drive change and that, what have you. And how is the VMware relationships and the partnerships going to ensure that people are able to continue running their business and not face those great challenges of deprecation? I mean, how many NT4 servers are still deployed? The answer is too many.
Yeah.
One is too many, but there's far too many still deployed.
Everything we buy today becomes our future legacy.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think because we're talking about some really big stuff, Kit, and what I would like to see, to Christopher's point, is how does VMware, I've been quoted to say this a lot, VMware moves at the speed of the CIO. VMware needs to move slightly faster than that and bring the CIO along. And how does this help get there?
Yeah. Okay, so there's like 5 questions I got mashed up here.
You're a CTO, you can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it.
I'll just.
You like to simplify, right? So
I do like to simplify, so I'll answer the questions you didn't ask, the ones I want to answer.
Right.
You're a CTO, you should be.
Works well. So the question is, can you actually tell that I'm doing that, though?
That's right.
Yes, we can.
That's right.
So going back here. So on the previous question, you're absolutely right. Infrastructure is a means to an end, right? And we realize that. And that's exactly why what we're doing here. We think this is one of the easiest means to the ends, right? It's like it's a cloud service. You click a button, and a few weeks later you get it. It's physically there in your environment, right? And you're also right that it's not just about infrastructure. It's about this high-level stack. So that's why I kind of separated out to having the delivery mechanism, consumption mechanism for vSphere and the SDDC, and then actually what is that vSphere and the SDDC itself, and what are we delivering there? And so those are 2 complementary questions in both focus areas for us as a company. What we're focused on here is kind of that, the second one there, the consumption model. But we are absolutely focused on getting that full stack so that we can deliver that same sort of experience, right? Now, Keith, I forgot your. Let's see. Oh, yes, the CIO speed question. Okay, so you're right. So I think we're doing a bunch of things here. So again, this is a cloud service, and what that means is that there aren't really. I'll say the CTO way first. There aren't really versions anymore of vSphere. There's the current version and the next version. Now, obviously, we still have versions, like there's still version numbers, 6.9, blah, blah, blah. They will oftentimes be versions you can't necessarily get on-prem, because these versions release every 3 months, whereas on-prem releases today about every 12 months, but we're moving actually to about a 6-month cadence on-prem even. So there's no choice about whether you take the update or not. The choice is, you get some choice around when. And so, that does create, that's both a good thing in the sense we're constantly moving it forward, giving you the latest features. It also can be a bad thing for some folks in that, like, okay, you got to move at a certain speed. We work closely with our partners to make sure those partner tools work together. In terms of these existing, older applications, I want to differentiate between so there's the version of vSphere software, and then there's internal what we call hardware version inside the guest, right? And it's very rare that any sort of vSphere upgrade breaks internal guest hardware compatibility or guest compatibility in general, right? So that's something we test extremely thoroughly. So we can keep those existing apps within the VMs running even while we upgrade the versions of vSphere moving forward there, right? So this is this notion of how do we help simplify that? And to that earlier point that Rita made, private cloud has been difficult. And so what I want to distinguish really quickly is this concept of virtualized data center and private cloud. A lot of times people conflate these two as if they're the same thing, but really they're very different. Because a virtualized data center is the same old traditional IT process, just you now have a virtualization basis for that rather than having bare metal. And so the interesting thing about a virtualized data center is most of your process doesn't actually change. It's still traditionally IT process, file a ticket, this sort of stuff. And so when you move to private cloud, that of course requires virtualization, but it actually requires a lot more because it requires fundamental changes in IT process. And that's been the big challenge. As we know, technology isn't really that hard. The hardest part is people and process and organization and managing that sort of change. And that's been what customers have struggled with. And one of the reasons people go to public cloud is actually an end run around their internal process. It's an easy button. They can take a credit card and just get the thing they need, kind of completely circumventing the normal processes that they have. And of course, we've seen a lot of customers struggling to now get their arms wrapped around that to provide all the security and management, et cetera, benefits they need. And so what we're doing here is offering customers not so much an end run around, but saying, hey, you can now consume this cloud experience on-prem, right? So you don't need to change everything internally. You can change a few things and start consuming this and allow us to take some of that heavy lifting on your behalf, right? So that's kind of the way we think about that. So to all the points you guys made, you're absolutely right. Like, this by itself is a really good thing, but it's obviously not enough in terms of the full sort of vision that we talked about. And there's a lot of work that we're doing from a vSphere perspective to drive a lot of that end-to-end solution. Yes?
So the business problem we have that's a huge one is shadow IT.
Yep.
So people are circumventing the IT departments because they're slow, right? Mm-hmm. They're still siloed.
Yep.
So developers and even people who aren't developers are circumventing IT. They're going out to public cloud. They're going out to SurveyMonkey, whatever it happens to be, rather than their IT departments.
Yep.
That's taking IT budget out of IT hands.
Yep.
And we're all in the business of IT, right? So if they're taking budget out of IT, that hurts us all because we cannot innovate. So that's the business problem, or one of the business problems that's really being solved by what you propose.
Well, what we see when we talk to customers is that, let's be honest. Let's go back to the business problem. Like, very few customers, or partners for that matter, differentiate themselves by how well they run VMware infrastructure. Let's be blunt about that, right? Now, you can very well negatively differentiate yourself by how poorly you run VMware infrastructure, because like it takes down your apps all the time and that sort of stuff. But if you run our infrastructure perfectly, that probably won't make a huge difference to your business if your customer-facing applications aren't all that good, right? And so a big thing of what we're doing here is saying, let's just simplify that. Let's make that table stakes. Running VMware infrastructure well should be table stakes. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're doing across the board today that you've seen, right? With VxRail and VCF, and now this product as well. The idea is, like, let's just make it super simple. And what we've seen is that customers can then take those resources and actually focus on higher level concerns. How do you drive more automation? How do you increase speed? How do you make these changes to private cloud or kind of this more cloud-based agile model? Things that really can then help drive the business forward. So exactly, and that's a lot of what we're seeing here, right? We also see a lot of instances where customers may not have that many people on site, and so they have challenges managing remote sites or managing at scale, especially when you look at folks like retail customers who might have 10,000 different locations. And what we've done historically within VMware is focus on, okay, let's get that individual data center or individual location running really well. We focus less on how do you manage across them all. And so again, a lot of what we're doing here is that hybrid cloud control plane to make management at scale much more easy. And so again, a lot of those are sort of the business cases that are driving interest here, right?